There's a moment that almost every dog owner has experienced. You leave the house like any other day. Nothing feels different. Nothing seems wrong. Just another routine. Another normal exit. You grab your keys and go. And then you come back. And something has changed. A pillow is torn apart. A shoe is shredded. Furniture scratched like something tried to get out. And the reaction is immediate. Why would my dog do this? Especially after a normal day. A normal routine. You just left like you always do. Because from the outside, it feels intentional. It feels like something done out of frustration, or even revenge. But that interpretation comes from a human perspective. And dogs don't think that way. They don't plan actions to teach you a lesson. They don't act out of spite. What they do is respond to states, to sensations, to emotional shifts inside their own body. And the moment you leave, something changes inside them, not always dramatically, not always visibly, but internally. The environment is no longer the same. Because for your dog, your presence is not just company, it's regulation. It's stability. It's the reference point that tells their nervous system, everything is okay. And when that disappears, there's a gap, a subtle one for some dogs, a very intense one for others. And that gap is where the behavior begins. When you leave, your dog doesn't track time like you do. There's no clear sense of, they'll be back in a few hours. There's only a shift. From presence to absence. And for many dogs, that shift isn't neutral. It's felt. Their breathing changes slightly. Their body becomes more alert. Their awareness sharpens. They start scanning the environment, listening, waiting, trying to understand what just changed. And in that state, objects begin to matter, not randomly, but specifically your shoes, your clothes, the place where you usually sit, anything that carries your scent. Because scent, for dogs, is not just recognition, it's connection. It's the closest thing to you when you're not there. So when they interact with those objects, chewing, scratching, pulling, it's not about destruction. It's about contact. It's an attempt to reconnect with something familiar, in a moment that no longer feels stable. And this is where most people misunderstand what's happening, because it doesn't look emotional, it looks physical. But what you're seeing on the outside is just the expression of something happening internally, something your dog doesn't yet know how to regulate. Now here's where it becomes even more important, because not all destruction comes from the same place. Some dogs destroy things because they're bored. Too much energy, not enough stimulation. But that kind of behavior is usually scattered, random, opportunistic. What we're talking about here is different. This happens when you leave. It happens repeatedly. And it often targets things that belong to you. That pattern tells a different story. Not boredom, but emotional dependence. Not misbehavior, but difficulty with separation. Your absence isn't just noticed, it's felt in the body. And your dog doesn't yet have a way to regulate that feeling, so they externalize it. Through movement, through contact, through physical release. And by the time you come back, everything has already happened. Which is why punishment doesn't work. Because your dog isn't connecting your reaction to the past behavior. They're only responding to your energy now. And if that energy carries tension, frustration, distance, that becomes part of the cycle. Leaving becomes heavier. Returning becomes uncertain. And the next time you walk out the door, the internal response can be even stronger. So what looks like destruction is actually communication. Silent, unprocessed, physical. Your dog isn't trying to ruin your things. They're trying to regulate something they don't fully understand yet. And once that internal state becomes more stable, the behavior begins to change. Not because they learned not to destroy, but because they no longer need to. And if this made you see your dog differently, make sure to like the video and subscribe. Because here, we don't just explain behavior. We help you understand what your dog is actually experiencing. And if you stayed until the end, thank you for taking the time to understand something most people overlook. Your dog feels the difference.